siguiente expositor se llama Derrick Hutchinson. Él es un experto con formación en física, trabajó algunos años en CIC, tiene experiencia en desarrollo de productos y evaluación de sistemas en la construcción, ahora lidera las ventas, es miembro de NRCA, IBEC, SPRI, ARMA y ASTM. Su conocimiento y afiliaciones respaldan su éxito. Favor de darle la bienvenida a mi colega Derrick Hutchinson.
Thank you. Thank you, Hector. All right. Thank you for that introduction. That was excellent. I've been with USG for 17 years now, as Hector mentioned. I manage the roofing business for USG, and today I want to talk about how coverboards increase the hail performance of single-ply roof systems. Just a little bit about myself, as Hector mentioned. I do have a degree in physics. I worked at our innovation center for half of my career at USG. I'm involved in all of the organizations from roofing, and I'm extremely happy to be here at Roofing Day in Mexico, so looking forward to being invited again next year. So it's all exciting stuff, and if you guys find me on YouTube, you'll see me say I love roofing, which I really do. All right, so just want to talk a little bit surrounding coverboards, why they're important, what it means for roofing, and one of the things that we all run into is there's so many different systems out there, right? Today we talked about BUR, we talked about PMMAs, different single-plies, so there's just a wide variety of different things that you can select, and from our perspective, including a coverboard in that system, which I know a few of the presenters mentioned today, including that in there will take that investment quite some ways, and I know even Brian from IBEC talked about how it can come into a legal battle, right? And so including coverboards in there is just a small investment to protect that roof system as you move forward. So now talking a little bit what that roof system looks like and where the coverboard comes into play. Number one, it's there right on top of the insulation, right below the membrane. To protect that insulation, we'll talk a bit about how it protects the insulation. It's there for heat transfer. A lot of times people will, or the contractors will fasten down the insulation and then low rise in the coverboard on top of that, so protecting it from the heat transfer from the fasteners going into it. It's a substrate where you can hot mop to, you can torch to, and of course it acts for a fire barrier, for wind uplift protection, and also hail. In addition, you can put it on an existing roof. So let's say your roof is towards the end of that life cycle. You want to put a coverboard on top of that for a nice, flat, clean substrate. It'll give you all the benefits that I talked about earlier, but also just basically taking that roof system and extending the life of that roof system. So in that application, it's a recoverboard. And we talked about parapets today. I know we talked about how parapets are there for a fire application, how it's there to enhance the wind uplift as well. So including a coverboard right on top of that parapet wall is important. Number one, it is the approved surface that you can adhere the roof membrane to. So whether it's whoever single ply or mod bit or peel and stick, you can put that right onto the coverboard, which is on the parapet wall. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the different forces that impacts roof. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into fire, maybe not as deep into wind as Melody talked about wind. We'll talk about foot traffic, and we'll talk about hail as well. So number one, fire, right? Fire is just a big concern. I know there was a presentation earlier that showed the Walmart building. That was pretty significant. And from an insurance agency, that's one of their biggest concerns is fire, hail, tornado, right? So they're always looking at those different things. And when you think about fire, you have to think about it from two ends, right? From inside the building and from outside the building, because it can occur from either end. And there's two different evaluation agencies that evaluate that. There's UL, Underwriters Laboratory, that's based in Northbrook, Illinois. And then there's Factory Mutual, that's based in Boston. So just to talk a little bit surrounding UL 790, E108, it was shown a little bit earlier how that applies to fires outside the building. So what it is, if there's a tree on fire, a building next door on fire, how do you prevent that fire from going on to the building next door? So with that test, as mentioned earlier, there's a Class A, Class B, and a Class C, Class A being the highest. And there's 3 different evaluations that are done for this test. And I've seen it done many, many times, and it's definitely a very stringent evaluation to pass. It's extremely hard to pass, especially if you're going for a Class A with an unlimited slope. So that image on the left side gives you an idea as to what it looks like. And so the first test is a spread of flame, and it's basically a flame that goes on for 10 minutes, and they measure the char line, right? So if you're less than 6 feet, it's a pass for a Class A. If you're less than 8 feet, it's a pass for Class B. Less than 13 feet is it's a pass for Class C. The intermittent flame, this one's really challenging. That is a flame on for a minute and off for a minute. And what they do is they actually have a wind that's blowing as well at 12.5 miles an hour and blowing on the system. And if there's any type of fire that ignites above the roof, below the roof, it's a fail. So in addition, with the intermittent flame is they'll have the flame going off and on, but also when after an hour, which is for the Class A, then they just have the wind blowing, and they have that going, and basically just seeing if anything happens at all whatsoever. And then there's a burning brand. They basically have a wood brand. They set it on top of the roof system, light on fire with wind, and they measure to see if there's any type of ignition that happens of the roof system. So again, it's looking at a fire on the outside of a roof. If there is something like a tree branch that falls on the roof that's on fire, right, that's where the burning brand comes in. And an intermittent flame is if there's a fire hitting it off and on. So it's a really stringent test, and the people out there that evaluate for it do a really good job to make sure that the materials going into the roof system are safe. And then there's fire from inside the building. I know earlier today we talked about the fires from the inside and how that affects things, and it spreads across the roof system. So a calorimeter test is one of those that are done. A lot of time is referred to as the P assembly, so you get an hourly rating from the P assemblies. But again, it's just a fire that is done on the inside of a chamber. They'll light it on fire, and they want to measure how much fuel gets added to the flame, so how much that insulation melts and adds on to the flame. And basically, depending on the pass-fail rate, you can fail pretty easily depending on how many combustibles are in there. However, putting a board in there, a cover board in there as a thermal barrier right on top of the deck slows down the rate at which the fuel is added to the flame. So talk briefly about wind uplift. As I mentioned, Melody, you did a really good job talking about wind uplift earlier and how that attributes and how you calculate it from ASC 7 and so on. But again, it's a huge factor, especially in high velocity wind zones, obviously along the coast. Hurricanes, which we can see, they can go from a tropical depression to Category 5 in a matter of a day, right? So that's really challenging and ties into just overall global warming and the water warming. So from my perspective, we may see more and more high storms across the world. So again, losing that waterproofing layer basically destroys the contents inside that building, destroys the insulation. So making sure you have a strong system that can withstand the winds is important, right? I talked about AAC 7, so they basically run the calculations to determine, hey, based on the height, where the building's at, the terrain, what type of wind load is there, and then there's UL and Factory Mutual that runs the evaluations to determine, hey, how do these play in? And again, Melody talked about roof nav and how you can look at that and tie all that in to determine, hey, this is the wind uplift I need for this area. And again, looking at ASC 7, the wind basically goes across the roof system based on the velocity, the location of the building, the height, the ground, what type of building, if it's a school, if it's a warehouse, penetrations. But again, the corners have the highest wind load, followed by the perimeter, and then the field. Foot traffic. I know we talked about solar today and HVAC units. So going on top of a building to service those things or install solar units, which may happen 10 years after the building is built. Those are things that we think about when it comes to, hey, how do we make sure that we don't damage the membrane, don't damage the insulation, and create a leak down the road. So again, it's just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about, hey, what can I do to keep this roof secure for the warranty period and make sure that we don't have any failures along the road. And then so hail. Hail is another topic that's coming up quite often. It's occurring more often and becoming more damaging as well. This too is another area where the insurance agencies are looking at and saying, hey, what can we do to prevent the damage that's caused by hail, right? We see that, hey, there's nothing we can do to prevent it, right? It's going to occur, it's going to keep getting stronger, keep getting larger, occurring in many different areas, but what can we do to basically beef up the system so we don't have those failures, right? So number one, it'll be a premature failure of the roof system. If you end up with a puncture in that roof system, sometimes we even see hail go completely through the roof itself, right? Or if you have skylights, something like that. So to destroy the contents, obviously moisture coming in as well, because typically when there's hail, there could be rain as well. So talking real briefly surrounding hail and how it's formed, it's typically in a storm, right? You have some type of storm, a thunderstorm that's occurring, and with that you'll have some rain, but also the biggest thing is you'll have a warm updraft, right? So warm air going up into this storm. And one of the things that has the hail get larger and larger is the updraft that goes in. So the higher that updraft goes, the larger the hail gets. So the hail will actually cycle up and down within that storm. And as it gets larger and larger, there'll be a point where the storm can't hold it anymore, so it'll fall down to the earth and create damage, right? And again, the stronger and higher that updraft goes, the larger the hail is that comes down. So with that, you'll have hail. Hail can get really large. Sometimes it's golf ball size, pea size, but it can be softball size hail. 8 inches, weighing almost 3 pounds, that will do some damage, right? And especially when you're looking at roof systems, the type of damage that can be done there is significant. So you can see here, just pointing out a little bit of damage that's been done on different roof systems and what's been done to just try and patch it for some time. So they basically put some caulk over some areas that's been damaged. You can see over there where you have basically a ring that's been formed and a bunch of different splits that occurred from that area there that's been damaged by hail. So to evaluate hail, there's basically 3 different standards for hail, ASTM, FM, and UL. So we'll talk real briefly about each of them. I know today we talked a little bit about the cannon that shoots the ice ball out. So that's a image of it there going over some shingles and evaluating shingles for hail. But looking at ASTM, ASTM D3746, so that's basically a metal sphere that is dropped to measure hail. You can do that on the roof system itself. You can do it on assemblies that are done in a lab and so on. This one is not necessarily used too often. The two standards that are used the most are UL and FM. So for UL, they have basically class 1 to 4, and the image on the left gives you an idea as to the size of the steel ball. And so that steel ball is basically dropped from 20 feet in the air, and you have to impact the system twice, and you measure the indentation on the system. So you can see you kind of go from a small little marble all the way up to a hail ball that's almost 2 pounds, right? And so you're dropping that all the way down 20 feet, and the graph just gives you an idea as to how high-performing hardboards do compared to lower-performing coverboards out there. and measuring that indentation, basically going from 7/100 of an inch all the way to 1/4 of an inch in regards to indentation. And so the indentation is important, right? How much is that membrane going to flex into the roof system? And the less it flexes, the less likely for it to tear. And then so talking about FM, FM has 3 different categories for hail. They have moderate hail, and this is a map of the US just showing where moderate hail locations are, or where you have to have a moderate hail classification in your roof assembly. And then you have severe hail, and then very severe hail. For the moderate hail and severe hail, they basically utilize that same steel ball that they had for the class 4 on the UL, the bigger steel ball. And one of them is dropped from about 6 feet, and you measure indentation. You measure to make sure that there's no puncturing on the roof system or any damage to the cover board. And then the other one's dropped from about 12 feet. And again, you do the same thing, right? So those are, somewhat easy tests to pass. But again, if you wanted to put a roof on in any of these regions here, you basically have to follow FM guidelines if it's an FM insured building. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the very severe hail, as that's the newer one and something that comes up quite a bit is in regards to, hey, how do I pass that? What does that look like? And what system can I use? So the very severe hail, what they do is they have basically 2 tests. One test is with virgin material, and one test, they'll heat age and UV age the membrane for 1,000 hours. So basically simulating aging on a roof, right? Because hail may not happen as the roof is installed, may happen 10 years down the road. So what happens then compared to when it's new? So they'll do both tests. If you don't pass the first one, then no need to do the second one. So what they use is a 2-inch ice ball. As you can see one there, I love the ice balls in my drink. I use it, for my bourbon and everything, so that's where I have the ice balls. But they shoot that out of a cannon, 150 to 160 feet per second, which is basically 49 meters per second, or calculating it out, it's 176 kilometers an hour is how fast it's going, or 110 miles an hour. So it's going pretty fast, shooting at that roof system, and then they measure to see if there's any damage to the membrane, any damage to the cover board or the back of the cover board. So it is a very, very stringent test that does take a lot of thought process to pass. So you can see here's an actual test that occurred, right? And so you're looking at this and you're seeing, hey, the damage that happened to the membrane and to the insulation. And obviously this one, there's no cover board in here, so the damage is pretty significant. This one right here, I'm not sure if the video plays. Let's see. No, okay. So the video doesn't play here. There was a video here, but basically it's an ice ball being shot out of a cannon and going right into a roof system that doesn't have a cover board. You can see the indentation on there pretty good, and that's the ice ball kind of flying back at me as I'm recording this occurring. And then this one here is, it would have been another video as well, but the ice ball shooting out at an assembly with a cover board in there. This shot here is after the test, and you can see there's no indentation on the actual cover board or on the membrane itself, so it actually did really well in that assembly. Oh, there it is. So that's the video right there, and you can see the ice ball shot right out at it. So we'll talk real briefly about different cover boards out there and the attributes that they have. Primary focus will be the high-performing hardboards that are on the market. So first up is glass mat cover boards out there. These can be used in basically all roofing systems. You will get a Class A fire rating with that. They do have some very high wind uplift values as well, as you think about the high velocity wind zones. You will also get very severe hail ratings with that as well, so no concern when it comes to very severe hail and making sure that it passes when you look at FM ratings. You got mold, you have moisture resistant. And again, you know, one of the things is the compressive strength to look at as well. Looking at a high compressive strength material for passing when it comes to the hail or the wind. There's also cement boards on the market as well. These products here are basically a cementitious core with some type of glass fiber on both sides. They're actually non-combustible, so you will get a Class A rating with that. You will have some nice high wind uplift values with that. I know Melody mentioned like a 990, and I've seen some cement boards get that 990 PSF ratings. You will have severe hail ratings with that product. No mold. They are resistant to moisture and a very high compressive strength as well. I think one thing to think about is that when you look at the glass mat boards, or you look at the cement board, they have a nice scrim layer in there for the cement, or a glass spacer layer in there that can distribute the load and work out really well when it comes to hail. Gypsum fiber. This product here is a high density gypsum blended cellulose fiber. So the last presentation talked about tree huggers have roofs too. This product here is very green, 97% recycled material. Can be used in all roof system. You do get that Class A fire rating. You have extremely high wind uplift values, very severe hail ratings, and you get the mold, moisture resistance, and extremely high compressive strength, which allows it to do very well when it comes to impact. And that covers it from me, so I don't know if we have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Derrick.
Thank you.